I'm back.
He's back. All right.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm going to have to shut it off. Okay. Sorry about that. Somehow I got dinged. So I want to welcome everyone, and I want to give an apology for what just happened. That's a first. And also what's a first is that we're all together on an afternoon. Welcome to today's first session of business beyond business as usual. I'm so used to saying business as usual. We did that for 15 months. So we're kicking off the series. We're looking forward to leveraging this virtual format to host timely discussions with key leaders from business, public policy, and academic communities that impact Southwestern Pennsylvania and that impact our innovation sector. So for those of you who have joined to one of our almost 300 daily sessions to this series, this one will be slightly different. Representative, for your benefit, we actually launched a virtual series way back in March of 2020 that was at the onset of COVID, and we just wanted to keep people together. We did it for consecutive days. We had over 280 conversations just all across the spectrum of the innovation economy, everything that affected us in terms of food and poverty and everything, all social matters, issues around social determinants, as well as the leaders of the tech community, both inside of Pittsburgh and outside. We had nearly 6,000 individual people join us for that period of time, and we did it in bite-sized snippets at lunch for 30 minutes, and then we wrapped it up in June 4th of this year. So this series won't be daily for sure, but if we can avoid it, we don't plan to take up your lunchtime hours anymore. It's beautiful out. It's beautiful here in Pittsburgh. And what we will do is use this virtual series to connect with leaders who are working on just super timely issues, or who just simply can't be with us in person like today due to their location and all that's on their plate. So in our last series, for example, we were proud to host speakers and participants from across the globe, including Asia, the Middle East, Central America, and many other parts of the world. As you know, at the Tech Council, we believe in bringing the world to Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh to the world. So I want to give thanks to Huntington Bank. They have joined us as their most, just as believers in our work and making sure that we are doing all that we can do across the tech ecosystem to be connected. And they've been our partners right from the beginning. If you don't know them, they're a very active small business lender, and they've been super active during COVID and providing tremendous support to our members across the Pittsburgh tech ecosystem. So thank you, Huntington Bank and the team, specifically Susie Shipley and Kim Ravenda, who are both with us today. I also want to thank AT&T. They have been the support of the council for a very long time. They've been involved in our public policy work and related programming as well. They were right at the beginning involved in all things that mattered in terms of the digital divide. They were right there making sure that people had access, and everything from just digital access, even being involved in efforts to support food disparities and then the kinds of things that just affected us all over this period of the pandemic. So I really can't thank them enough. Also want to give a shout out to Vibrant Pittsburgh for their support. If you don't know them, we'll put a link in our site. And they are an economic development nonprofit that seeks to address one of the greatest challenges facing Pittsburgh region. It's the aging population and workforce by providing leadership to accelerate the growth rate of diverse workers in the region. They have engaged over 80,000 people in diverse talent attraction initiatives and have helped more than 1,700 newcomers be welcomed and get settled into the region. So thank you for all of them. So now I'm going to jump in, and I'm very excited because we're going to be hosting State Representative Ed Gainey to the program, who I think you will agree is working on super, super timely issues. So good afternoon and welcome to our session of Beyond Business as Usual. We're excited to have you here today, Representative Ed Gainey. You have an amazing background, and we want to just gain some insights into what you're thinking about and what you're working on in terms of a number of key issues. So thank you for joining us today. Before we jump right in, and start talking about public policy, the state budget or the future of the city, all the things that you've been working on day in and day out for quite a long time. I want to take a few minutes to talk more about your background and the why. What is your why that led you to pursue public, public office back in 2012? Can you talk about your personal journey a little bit, before your time in the Pennsylvania House?
Yeah, growing up, I never met a politician. I never aspired to be an elected official because I never met one. Like in my neighborhood, I grew up in East Liberty. We didn't have no elected officials knock on our doors, call us to take a poll to see who we was voting for, or have community meetings that really talk about how we improve the community. So growing up, I didn't know no elected officials. They weren't in my neighborhood. I really didn't get involved in community and politics until I got to college, Morgan State University. First day I was there was a protest because they wanted to improve the conditions of the university, and they thought that the state, for various reasons, was trying to defund the university. So they wanted to make sure that we as the class, we as the students, made a statement that we did not want Morgan State to be defunded, and that we wanted to make sure that it remained a historical Black college and university. And so that was my first taste of politics right there. First elected official I've ever made is someone who assisted us in making sure that it stayed at HBCU, and that was the mayor of Baltimore, who happened to be a Black man by the name of Mayor Kurt Smoke. And so, I didn't work for him. I didn't intern but I was inspired by the fact that he was willing to help a school remain a historical Black college and university. And that inspired me. And just to see the sit-ins and the protests and what we did up in Annapolis to make sure that we remained as traditional HBCU, that inspired me to work in community development. So when I came home, the first, there was an organization called East Liberty Development, Inc., and they were closed down due to some of the racial tensions inside the neighborhood, and they were about to open up under the leadership of a gentleman named Willie Winstead. So I went to him and told him that I was willing to work for free because I know they didn't have no money. As long as he could teach me community development, I was willing to work for free. But when they got some money, hire me if I do a good job, and so I ended up working for him. And then I ended up going to work for a state representative, and then I worked for 2 mayors. So when I got downtown, coming from the neighborhoods I came from, I always looked at working at the mayor's office as an institution of higher learning. So whatever they thrown away, I went and read, and I kept files on every development, every elected official in the city of Pittsburgh to get more updated on the political environment in the city, and just begin to study community development and participate in neighborhood development plans. Then I ran for state representative. On my 3rd try, I won, and I ran for mayor this year, and we were successful. And we're just looking for getting the partnering and coordinating and moving the city forward. That's what it's about, and that's what we're here to build.
Yeah, I hear that when you walk around East Liberty, everyone knows Ed Gainey.
I don't know about that.
East Liberty has definitely changed, right?
Yeah, it has. It has. Definitely. It's like it's funny. It's like 2 different streets, right? If you stand on Penn Avenue, you see the old East Liberty, and if you look on the other side of Penn Avenue, you see the new East Liberty. The reality is, though, there's no bridge, the gap between the old and the new, so you feel more tension than you do love. And I think that's something that we have to overcome. But again, that's what happens when you have explosive growth, that you don't connect the dots to make people understand that there is a history of these neighborhoods. And it's not that we don't want new development, but we want integrated development where people don't feel displaced, but included in the new economy. And I think some of the things like that got overlooked.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has shifted in the 20 years that I've been here. And
sure,
so you were raised, where were you raised in East Liberty?
So I was raised in a place, it was, first I lived with my grandma in the high rise. And when my mom moved to East Liberty, we lived in the low rises in Liberty Park. So that's where I grew up at, between the high rise and the low rises in Liberty Park.
And so what did your family think about you running for office and getting into politics, since you didn't know anyone?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting at the time, because at the time that we came home, my first real working on any campaign was, my mom used to be the office manager for a gentleman named Harvey Adams, who was big in the NAACP. He was president of NAACP in the local chapter. In the midst of her working for him, she met a gentleman by the name of Salahuddin. And so on Salah's first campaign, not his first campaign, but the campaign that he won on, my mom ended up being his office manager. And so at that time, you know, again, I used the same strategy I used in East Liberty. Look, I'll work for free. Just, take me around with you. Let me be your body person. Let me meet people. Let me see what this is like. Let me get a feel for politics. Let me get a feel for the movers and shakers in this city. Let me get a feel for the different people you come in contact with and what their mindset is, what they think about, how they see the city, how they feel about the isolation of the city, the silos of the city, how they feel they can grow. So, I learned as much as I could on that campaign. And it was a good campaign to learn from because, again, I was going around with a candidate that was about to become the city council person. And it was good just to learn from that perspective.
So the PA's House and Senate are working actively right now to craft a budget that's set to begin, hopefully, right, July 1st. So this is a really busy time for you, and I can't thank you enough. Can you talk to us about any of the state of these negotiations and maybe share some priorities that you're hoping for?
Well, always money in education. I think that, the number one primary factor here that the governor is driving, and I'm with him, is education. I think that we got a great opportunity, particularly coming out of a pandemic, to reimagine education on so many levels, and to be more prepared the next time a pandemic hits, because we know we're going to see another virus. There's no question. So the money that he's trying to put into pre-K and early childhood and Head Start, I think is phenomenal. And also just talking about how we can expand broadband so that when the next virus hits and we have to go virtual, that regardless if you live in Squirrel Hill or you live in Northview Heights, that there's broadband access where it's not getting dropped or interrupting the education of our children, I think is critically important. But I also think that, that's the budgetary side of it. The theory side that moves into practice is we need to reimagine how we do education. We understand the dynamics that we live in right now and what's going on. And so I think it's a great time to engage citizens too, particularly, all parents, don't get me wrong, all parents, but my district is, a high percentage of single moms, right? And it was very difficult for single moms during this pandemic. One, some of them couldn't work. Unemployment was a problem. Understanding the dynamics of classes they may have not taken for years, trying to help their kids navigate a system, learning Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and everything else. It was a real hectic time. And then just thinking about how you gonna put food on the table. Some of them single moms in my district got 2 or 3 kids and they single and they just trying to make ends meet, let alone trying to meet this new dynamic that nobody was prepared for. So thinking about how we redo education and what we have to do to be successful, I think right now is forward thinking. So when the next virus hits, we're more prepared than reacting to the problems that it brings.
So you and I have talked a little bit about Pittsburgh's economy, some of the key issues. But I want our listeners, excuse me, to hear your perspective on what's happening here in Pittsburgh from your view. So what are some of the biggest strengths that we have to build on? And what are some of the areas that need urgent attention?
I think one of our greatest strengths is technology. I don't think there's no question about that. We've seen what it's done to the local economy. The problem is everybody's not playing this in this economy. There's a lot of people that's been left out, and you feel it when you go through this city that a lot of communities feel like they've been left, neighborhoods feel like and communities feel like they've been left behind. And for decades, you got to remember, particularly for the minority community, it was intent that we work about, that they weren't hired for decades. So we have to reverse that trend and be intent in making sure that we're bringing minorities into the fold and that we're increasing MBEs, bringing down the procurement contracts to ensure that there's more contracts for people to be able to bid on, to help to build that wealth throughout and diversify our portfolio. So at the end of the day, everybody feels they got access and opportunity. That's what makes your city more welcoming. And I think that's an opportunity that we have, and that's one that we have to build on. I think another one of our strengths is just our resources, our natural resources. You look at our 3 rivers, they're beautiful. We have natural resources that are still underdeveloped, that I think we have a great opportunity to be able to listen to people and find out how we can invest more in our riverfronts. So I think we got a lot of opportunity. And I always look at it this way: if there's no disparities, there's no opportunity. So I don't look at disparities as a negative. I look at them as a sign of growth. As long as we have disparities, we have an opportunity to grow, because that's what disparities do. It gives you opportunity. If you don't have a problem, you ain't got no problems. So I look at the disparities that we have and look forward to trying to build on them to make this a city for all.
So what do you think in terms of the tech community? What do you think if you had a couple of action items? What do you want to say to us that we should?
In the tech community, one, I want to congratulate you. That's number one. I think that the growth here has been phenomenal. I just think there has to be more diversity. And I think also that, the other thing that we do well here is research and development. We do the license, we do the patents. But at some level, we have to find a way to increase. And I'm not saying it's easy, but it's necessary, because if we're doing the R&D here, we should also be doing the manufacturing here. We should be manufacturing right here in the city of Pittsburgh the products that we're doing R&D and that we're bringing forward. If we were doing manufacturing here, then that would give us the opportunity to diversify the tech field, because manufacturing is the assembly line, and that assembly line is something that we could use to grow jobs. Now, how we get there, that's why I would look at organizations such as yourself to work with, to talk about how we get there. I don't want to say I have all the answers, because that means I won't have anything to learn. But I thought, critical learning is be able to talk to those that this is what you do every day. This is your ministry. But please, help me out and teach me how we can diversify this industry by making it attractive for what manufacturing we have left to come to Pittsburgh. That's a working relationship that I look forward to.
Yeah, and we do as well. We do as well. So, some of the key issues that you focused on during your time in Harrisburg have included, obviously, education, workforce, and transportation. So can we start with transportation? Because you're a supporter of something called Vision Zero. Can you talk about Vision Zero?
Yeah, to me, Vision Zero is, removing, cutting back on car fatalities. But also, I think it's a great opportunity from a mobility standpoint to do more about how we get around our city, whether that's biking, whether that's walking, whether that's creating enough, make sure our sidewalks are good so walking becomes mobile. I know some people feel a certain way about bike lanes. I think the number one issue with bike lanes is that it wasn't communicated to, people and businesses that was on that street to determine how we can work together. I think in Pittsburgh, everybody knows the more we communicate with each other, the more we discover how we can make things happen, the better it is. I'm not sure that was always the case, but I think that we have an opportunity here to use some of our resources, such as walking, such as biking, and other forms of transportation to really bring this region together and make it a healthy neighborhood. I mean, a healthy city. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about that right there.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is the Port Authority. They're also facing major cliffs in their funding, even though they just got some infusion recently and a grant from the federal government. Can you talk about how we're going to maintain stable funding at all for mass transit?
Right, that's a great question, right? That's a great question. That's something that we're talking about now. Nobody wants to raise taxes, particularly in a time like this. But the reality is we have to find a way to pay for transportation and what that looks like. There's going to be a host of proposals on the table. To say that I have that concrete answer right now will be premature, because I don't. I don't think there's one solution that's going to solve this. I think that when you talk about transportation, you also, we're talking about mass transportation, you talk about bridges and roads, you talk about state roads, you're talking about, even in rural areas where they don't have, some of them still don't have roads, they have dirt roads. So, I mean, the size of this is enormous. And so to sit here and say, well, hey, here's something that we can do, will be a little premature until we put everything on the table and begin to determine what is the right direction for this state to go. It's going to be a heavy conversation.
It is. You're going to have a lot of good, heavy conversations. So
yeah, absolutely.
Now let's talk about education again. We'll go back to it. So obviously the pandemic brought in all the glaring inequities in our schools. And, even here at the Tech Council, we joined forces with Pittsburgh Public Schools and Neighborhood Allies and Google and Aurora to, help deliver thousands of laptops.
Hey, thank you for that. That's major. That's not even big. That's major. That's a major investment in the lives of our youth. That's major right there. We should just stop right there and celebrate that moment, because
Okay.
That's what was necessary. I mean, that's what you call collaboration, working together across lines. That's the type of unity I'm talking about that builds cities. And a lot of times we look at it as
That's right.
as something that is small, but it's, it's the
Right.
small things that have the biggest impact. So, the organization doing something like getting laptops for PPS and maybe other school regions around, school
Yes.
districts around this region, that's major, because a lot of these parents, when I was a kid, look, I'd have probably broke 2 laptops by now, right? So, I can only imagine what it means to have somebody, because each one of these kids are going to need backup laptops. My kids, wow. So, I understand it, but again, they're kids. So you have to have more resources than just one. So the laptops that y'all provided, I'm sure came through big.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And on behalf of the tech community, I just got to tell you that we still felt like it wasn't enough. So I appreciate you saying to take a moment to appreciate that. But with AT&T, try and provide, and Comcast, and go through the list, and Google and Aurora and Neighborhood Allies and all our members that were giving cash so to get these laptops and put food on the table. There was also times we put food on the table. There was a sense of unification, which gives me optimism. But it obviously still feels like not enough. So when we talk about education, and so I appreciate you saying we're never finished. We can't take time.
No, we're not finished. No. And that's what I mean again by reimagining education. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. Like, we have to be prepared for this, and not just by saying let's have 1 laptop per student, because we know that's unreasonable. And that's not what's going to happen. They're kids, and kids are going to do what kids do. At least I expect that. As many parents do, and we know exactly what that means. We were children before. And so we just have to make sure that the supply is there to be able to meet the demand. Some of these education hubs that they brought up, that was real big, because 1, it gave the parents a break, right? And 2, it helped these kids be able to stay in somewhat of a setting where there was still some social activity, even though there was social distancing. And then the other thing is that some of these kids thrived in the pandemic, being at home and really, that I don't know what my daughter was one of them at home. She, almost a 4.0 student and high honor roll. And, so, there's some things that we need to look at, because there's some new fruit that we discovered that works, that, we have to talk about how we engage that in a way that is good for all students. But this pandemic brought a lot of knowledge to the table, and all of it wasn't negative. Some of it was positive, and I believe we just got to examine that.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so true. And that's what we face in the workforce as well. People working from home and people being in the office, the level of productivity, et cetera. So great point. So what about rolling out 5G to every neighborhood in Pittsburgh? That's something that we're hoping happens soon. Can you talk about your vision on that?
Yeah, I just actually, someone from AT&T was just talking to me about it. And this is something that we're dealing with at the state right now. We're going through it. We're looking at it. We know a lot of people want it, and then the second thing is, this is where, this is where we also have to be able to eliminate a lot of the misconceptions that's been out there around 5G, and get people to feel more comfortable with it. So they're not fearful of it, but they're willing to accept what this 5G system can do in terms of speed, in terms of other things. But I think one of the things that we have to do is be able to educate. I think that's where we go wrong. We talk about education, but we fail to educate to remove some of the misconceptions that are out there. And then the misconceptions they still become lies, but they become truthful lies, right? People believe in them. And so I think that, going forward, as we begin to roll things out, I think that particularly in the tech community, that this is one way the tech community can engage neighborhoods, right? Engage neighborhoods that sometimes wouldn't get this volume of knowledge. And we expect people to know, but when you work in 2 or 3 jobs, and you just trying to put, meat on the table, or make ends meet, you're really not connected to what 5G is. So the misconceptions becomes your education, instead of someone like the tech community being able to say, here's the reality of it. Here's why we need 5G. And in educating them, you've also given them the ability to have knowledge on exactly a new industry that's here.
So do you have any thoughts? Gina Winstead has a question. I'm just going to paraphrase it because I know we're trying to pack things in. Do you have any thoughts about the tech community and how we can help some of what Gina's referred to as the hemorrhaging of the Black community having an exodus from the city?
Wow, that's a good question. But it's been that way because of the inability to have access and opportunity. Feeling like that you're rejected, and that every time you bring an idea to the city, there's no reason if your idea works in other cities, it can't work here. If that's the case, there's a reason why it's been rejected, and that's what I meant by, for decades we was intentionally kept out, and now we have to reverse that trend and be intentionally brought in. That's how you diversify the economy. You got to provide opportunity. There's a lot of people always say, it's a shame that we don't even have an African-American middle-class community in the city of Pittsburgh. Not one. People want to say why people leave here because they don't see the culture represented here. If I'm coming from Upper Marlboro, Maryland, I'm looking to live in an affluent African-American community. If I don't see it, I don't see my culture represented here. If I'm Latino and I'm coming to this city and I want to be around Latinos, I don't see my culture reflective here. So it's not welcoming. Pittsburgh has to become more welcoming, and the business community has to open up to be laser focused and intent, even in the tech community, about bringing in minorities. We have to diversify the portfolio, because if we don't, then we're not a welcoming city. And we can't be America's greatest city in the world if we're not diverse and bringing in people that we know can add value to this city. And that's opening up the doors of opportunity.
So, we're trying to pack so much in here, no, don't apologize at all. This is fabulous. We talked about the disconnect between jobs, et cetera, et cetera. We're building an apprentice program, a certified apprenticeship program. And I mentioned to you last week, and we actually are going to have a release of that next week. And I believe it's the 23rd of June, where we're going to be talking about people actually having jobs by the time that they go into a program and being paid when they go into one of these boot camps. And at the end of that boot camp, they actually have a job with that skill set, so that day one, they are working for Ed Gainey Tech Company, day one. And then they go into that work, and they start to, they know they're not worried about, putting food on the table. They're actually, having an opportunity to learn and make at least minimum wage, at least, while they go through the program. So I'm pretty excited about that, because I feel like that's action oriented, and that has material outcomes. And I feel that the tech community has really rallied around that and said, yes, we're in.
I'm trying to think, I want to say this. The greatest common denominator is jobs. We need jobs. And whether it's an apprentice program or a workforce development program, I've always said, the issue that I've had with workforce development program and some apprentice programs is that, they're great with training. I'm not going to take that away from the training, but at the end, they give you a nice, pretty award, right? The award is nice, but Monday morning, you still broke. And I always tell people, I don't need an award, I need a reward. You're coming from low-income communities, such that I came from, it's nice that you gave me an award. I feel good for an hour. But at the end of the day, I still got to put food on the table for my family. And so any program, apprenticeship program or workforce development program that leads into actual jobs, that's a reward. That's a beautiful reward, because now I'm taking care of my family. Now I see my life different, because jobs is the common denominator. We've seen it in the pandemic. People still went to work. People didn't stop going to work. People were fighting to go to work. So even though we thought it was unhealthy, they still wanted to go to work. Jobs have always been the common denominator. So any apprenticeship program or workforce development program that we have that leads people to permanent jobs, you can't ask for more than that.
And this is actually jobs right at the onset. So we're trying to take it in a much more intentional way. So listen, the importance of public-private partnerships is pivotal. It's pivotal in almost every area that you talked about, but it can't be any more pivotal than it is in workforce. So it takes all of us to come together. So do you want to say one last thing? Do you want to? Wait, I just lost you. We lost you. Does everyone hear him? Okay, Representative Gainey, you're on. We can't hear you. Okay, let's see. Let's unmute and then unmute again. Are you there? We can't hear you. We can't hear you. So I am going to, hello. He could be in an area where we need a little bit more, some more broadband, right? So I think I'm going to use this opportunity. We've been together with Representative Gainey for 30 minutes now, and really can't just appreciate it so much. We are going to end the show, and I am going to stay connected, as well as many of us, with Representative Gainey in these months ahead. I really appreciate the time that we had with him, and he's still trying to talk to us. He's determined. He's determined. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We will have more conversations with Representative Gainey, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. We'll get the questions to him. I'm sorry that happened. Yeah.